Hey, what's up, guys? It's Timothy here. Looking at the spoilers for today, we're going to see a common cycle. I like cycles. They don't print cycles at common very much anymore. Or at least, I believe they said they're trying to avoid it, even though we still get quite a few cycles in pretty much every set. And cycles are a very well-defined and portion of a set, so I like seeing them. But we're just going to look through the spoilers. This is day, 37 of Kaladesh spoilers, and we're up to about 80-90 cards spoiled. It'll say at the top of the page when I scroll up, but quite a few. Friday, or tomorrow, I should say, we'll probably get a good chunk of them, and then I would expect the rest of the chaff, not really chaff, but the rest of the set to just kind of filter in next week over time. But let's go ahead and start with today's spoilers. Again, thank you for being here and watching this video. I know I might get 10 views per video, but I'm not really in it for the views. I'm just in it to share my opinion. So if you're one of those people who is taking the time out of your day to actually listen to my opinion, I appreciate it, and I would love to hear your opinion as well. So anyway, moving on, we have Incendiary Sabotage. This is an uncommon instant, 2 and double red, so 4 mana. Additional cast to cost you sacrifice an artifact, and then it deals 3 damage to each creature. So this is pretty sweet. I love cards like this in Limited, and 3 is so much better in 2 when it comes to Limited, because there's just, especially in the last couple sets, I noticed really with Battle for Zendikar and onward, 2 3s are the standard 3-drop. 2 3s with some sort of upside. It's like the filler 3-drop, and a lot of games of Limited go, maybe turn 2 creature, turn 3 2/3, and then even a turn 4 3/3 or something like that. So Incendiary Sabotage will kill a lot of things. There is a lot of token generation in this set between things like Thopter tokens and the servo tokens that you get from Fabricate creatures. So I can see this card doing quite a bit and being a reasonably high pick in draft. Oftentimes we get cards like Flayin' Tendrils, Bite and Rain, Rise in Miasma, those -2/-2 effects in black, and they often just miss the mark of being playable in the main deck. Sometimes they're great main deck, but oftentimes you just leave them in the sideboard. 3 damage is so much better that I would err on the side of main deck in this card almost all the time, because it just kills so many things. With that being said, you do need artifacts to sacrifice to it, and a decent amount of artifacts. If Terrarion was in this set instead of Eldritch Moon, that would be fantastic, because you would draw a card off of it. If there does happen to be some sort of artifact that gives you a benefit off going to the graveyard, that would be fantastic for this. And in addition to that, just be careful. If you draft this card, make sure your whole deck doesn't die to it. These effects get way worse when they affect you just as equally as your opponent. You want to kind of leverage them to push yourself ahead in the game, or at least use them as a reset button. So if you're killing one of your opponent's creatures and you're just wiping your own board, maybe not the best idea in the world, but it's pretty sweet. And I love cards like this in Limited. They're usually pretty strong. 3 damage is pretty good for this sort of effect. Moving on to Angel of Invention. This is one of the cards that appears on the booster pack, the actual pack. So looks very similar to the other Angel. I believe it's Wisp Weaver or Weave. I don't know. It's Wisp Weaver Angel or something like that. The Blink one. Anyway, 5 and double white for a Mythic Angel, a 2/1. Flying, Vigilance, and Lifelink. So really good mix of abilities there. All very good abilities that play well together. Fabricate 2. Remember, that means it can come in with either 2/1/1 counters. So essentially a 4/3 Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink, which is very good for 5 mana. Or you can have it come in as a 2/1, which is pretty weak for a 5 mana card, but you also get the additional 1/1 servo. So that's your choice to make when the creature enters the battlefield. And then you see that it's just an Anthem effect tacked onto it as well. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. So even though this looks like a pretty weak card, if you're doing the Fabricate for the servo tokens, you're paying 5 mana for a 2/1 flyer, and it's going to take a lot of keywords to make that really worth it. Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink on if this were a common card and it didn't have the Fabricate or the Anthem effect, it would be a much worse. 5 mana Flying, Vigilant, Lifelink, 2/1 is much worse. But the fact that you have a lot of flexibility when you cast this card, makes it really, really good. Is it mythic quality? That's my only question, is like, is it mythic quality? It is an anthem and a creature in one, but I don't know that this needs to be a mythic. Like, this could be just a really strong rare, in my opinion. Maybe I'm underselling it. I think the card is very powerful, but it just doesn't strike me as mythic. And the reason I say that is, like, you're incentivized to go for the tokens here, I believe, and the reason for that is because you're going to add more power to the board that way. If you go for the tokens, those tokens are essentially coming out as 2/2s because of the anthem effect, so you're getting a total of 6 power off this creature instead of the 4 power you would get if you put counters on the Angel of Invention. But then the Angel is just so vulnerable. Like, a 2/1 dies to pretty much anything, and like, those keywords aren't really going to save it. And we've already seen, you know, a good number of effects at instant speed and sorcery speed that just, like, they can deal 1 damage to something. Die Young comes to mind, Harness Lightning comes to mind, and those are like commons and uncommons, not even rare. So I would really hate for my 5-mana mythic to just die to like a Make Mischief type effect or a Borrowed Malevolence type effect. Like, this is some sort of Eldritch Moondraft or something. Like, that's just a lot. And once this thing's taken off the board, those servos are just 1/1. So I know I'm talking about this card for a lot, but it has a lot of ups and downs. So it has the flexibility going for it that if you just need a big beater to finish the game out, you can do that. If you have some sort of other wide pumping effects or you need to go wide, it has that option as well. But it is very, very vulnerable if you do not make, or if you use Fabricate to make tokens. If it doesn't die right away, obviously slam dunk, fantastic card, but it's super, super vulnerable in that state. And if you can blink it, like, that's fantastic. That's the dream, I guess. Turn 5 this into turn 6 Wisp-Weaver, blink it, and have it come back in with counters or make more dudes. That's pretty good. But notice also, last thing about it, that the Anthem effect is for all of your other creatures, not just the servo tokens that you make. So you can actually play this and pump your board in addition to those tokens you're making, or do whatever, and it's quite strong. So if you already have a good board presence, it might just be best to put counters on this so that it doesn't die as easily, but I think it suffers from the same kind of problem as Gisela in Eldritch Moon, in that 3 toughness is like really scary for your big bomb creature. It's obviously a fantastic card. I'm knocking it a little for being mythic, but it's strong and I'm never going to pass it. Like, Anthem effects are great, and Anthems attached to 3 bodies seem pretty good. So maybe I should stop knocking it. Let me move the webcam. Seems annoying. Anyway, here's the first of that cycle I was talking about. They're all commons. They all have the same abilities on them. They just have different colors and different stats to start off with, and mana cost as well. So Thriving Rhino is the green version here. It's 2 and a green for a 2/3 Rhino. It's a common, like they all are. Each one of them says when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. So 2 energy counters on ETB for all 5 of these cards. And they all have the ability to, whenever they attack, you may pay 2 energy counters and put a 1/1 counter on it. So the creatures scale in power the more energy you can spend on them. In addition to that, they all give you energy, which can be either used on themselves or your other creatures, which is pretty neat. I like the way energy is designed to the cards that make energy can also use them, but you can also use your energy for other cards and kind of like put all your eggs in a different basket rather than spreading them out on creatures like this. So if you're not planning on doing anything crazy with the energy, this thing attacks as a 3/4 on turn 4, which is really, really strong for a common, and should obviously push you ahead. The green-red energy cards are really, really strong, and I can see green-red. I don't know if I want to call it green-red energy, but that's what it's leaning towards. Like, that seems like a really strong draft type that's just standing out to me right now. It has a lot of really good rares, uncommons, and commons going for it as far as that department is concerned. But 3/4 for 3. If you ever get more energy, you can pump more into it, making an even bigger attacker. Don't really need to click each one here since they're all kind of the same card, but you'll notice the red one, Thriving Grubs, another gremlin. Apparently grubs are gremlins, or maybe baby gremlins are called grubs. I don't know. I'm going to have to Google that one, but same exact ability, except on a 2/1 for 2. So a 2/1, not really my favorite stats. In fact, 2/1 is like almost the most unplayable stat combination in Limited, just because it's so bad. But this thing attacks as a 3/2 starting on turn 3, which, as I said with red-green, like, it's already aggressive, and these cards pair well together. Like, you can use the energy from the Rhino the turn after you play the Grubs, and you know, just have that 2 energy left over. So pretty sweet there. The black one, Thriving Rats, is a 1/2, so the reverse of it. I like that a little bit better. I think 2/3s are better than 3/2s in general, unless of course your opponent's just mana screwed and not playing anything. Then the 3/2 hits it, and they're faster, quicker, and does more damage. The difference is that 2/3s trade better, or at least stop your opponent from trading with your creature. So Thriving Rat's really weak starting body, same as the 2/1, but attacks as a 2/3 and then has the ability to just get bigger from there, which I like. Turtles, I'm a huge advocate for more turtle creatures. I don't know why I'm clicking this one, but Thriving Turtle, 1 blue for a 0/3, same ability. So this starts attacking as a 1/4 on turn 2, which is actually relevant because this can get the butt on this creature is like big enough that it's going to be really hard for an opponent to deal with this creature early in the game. So you can make a 1/4 essentially by turn 2, start getting in damage, and then if you can keep the energy coming, like, this is a threat that you play on turn 1 and just get so big by the time you scale into the mid to late game that your opponent really needs to find like an unconditional removal spell. They're not going to be able to burn this off if you can keep that energy flowing by the time you play it. Also want to point out like how good this card is in multiples. That goes for all of them, but like you can again put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Draft all of the Thriving Turtles, right? Start with one on turn 1. On turn 2, use its energy to pump it to a 1/4. Play some more Thriving Turtles. They each give you 2 energy, and then just go on and on and on. And again, I want to point out, especially for this guy, because he is a 1-drop, that if you are in the market for energy for other sorts of effects, maybe you have some really bomb rare that needs energy to get going, you can just draft these cards for that sake too. Like, they give you a blocker on the field, a blocker that has potential to be an actual attacker after a while, and then use their energy for something else. So just the idea that like this thing attacks as a 2/5 after the second time you pumped it, and you only paid 1 mana up front for it, seems really strong. Like, it's a little misleading because it's an 0/3, but it gets in there very, very early and very, very fast. Thriving Ibex is the white one. Awesome art on this, right? 3 and a white for a 2/4, and then the same sort of ability. So this one starts attacking as a 3/5 on the following turn, which is good. A 4 mana 3/5 is a pretty strong card for limited purposes. Outside of limited, it's not happening. But if you think of cards like Gavany Unhallowed from Eldritch Moon, like, they start off as a 2/4 for 4, but if you can ever stick 1 counter on them, same goes for this thing. I think it's an actual reasonable threat, and I think all 5 of these cards are slightly above filler status, that if you're either needing energy or if you are just looking for cards to fill out a certain color in your deck, like, these are all like mid-pack picks. I think every single one of them has the potential to be a really strong card, and they combo with each other, they combo with other cards. So I really like this cycle. I think it's very, very well designed. Moving on to more vehicles. It's really, really weird. I'm just going to point out, it's weird to go from a goat card to a caravan card, a caravan creature. Like, it's just a strange juxtaposition there. But anyway, Cultivator's Caravan is 3 mana for a vehicle. This one's a rare, and it taps to add any color of mana to your mana pool, so a Birds of Paradise, and you can also crew 3 it to make a 5/5. So I really like the design on this vehicle, and the reason is, when you're drafting vehicles and you're playing vehicles, you're not going to be able to safely crew them every single turn. If your opponent just has chump blockers, like, you're tapping a lot of your guys down to be able to get in there and just have them chump. The vehicles are at their best when you can either trample with them, or you know you're going to get a clean attack and hit your opponent, or you just need to force blocks. Like, that's when they're best to turn into creatures and attacking. But most of them don't do anything unless they're creatures. They're just artifacts that sit there. This one, on the other hand, works as a mana rock and fixes your colors. It works in any color. And then if you need it to, it just turns into a big 5/5 attacker for the turn. So It covers a lot of different fronts. It has utility when it's not attacking or blocking, and just being able to fix your mana seems really, really good for your artifact. They don't really print very good mana rocks, and if that's all this was a 3 mana artifact that tapped for a mana, it would be much, much less good. But the fact that it's a 3 mana artifact that taps for mana and occasionally attacks as a 5/5 makes it much, much more appealing to me, and I would definitely first pick this card. Pretty neat thing about the rare vehicles is that they're all colorless and they can go in any deck you play, so they're very safe first picks in a draft, which makes them much, much more appealing than it would be if that was like a red-black card with the same abilities or something like that. Moving on to Sueños Desenfrenados, Wild Dreams, I guess. I don't speak Spanish, but anyway. 1 green and XX for a sorcery, a rare sorcery that says return X target cards from your graveyard to your hand and then exile Wild Dreams. So this is an interesting ability. I'm going to go on the record here for saying I don't think this card is very strong, and I don't think it's a really good first pick as far as a rare goes compared to a lot of other rares in this set so far. And the reason is, like, it does scale, and scaling cards like this tend to work really, really well or be really interesting because they work at any point you need them to work. So the initial payoff here is pay green and 1/1, so 3 mana to return a card from your graveyard to your hand. That's not really a great effect, even in limited. Like, that's not great, but it is serviceable enough that you could play it in a couple decks. And then you get up to green 2/2, where you're paying 5 mana to return 2 cards, essentially just a restock effect. And I will remind people in M15 that restock was moved from a rare to an uncommon, and I think that was a good decision. Like, restock is a fine card, but it's not like a busted card. It's not a rare quality card anymore, and I agree with that I don't think it's that strong. And then obviously if you get up to 7+ mana, you return in 3+ cards. The problem is, though, and it's really flexible, I get that, and I get that flexibility adds a lot to the power of a card, but if you're paying 3 mana to return 1 card, that's not great. I would probably not even play a common that did that sort of effect, let alone a rare. If you're paying 5 mana to return 2 cards, that's fine, and that's probably going to be good in most of your decks. The problem is you're also probably not going to be able to cast anything else the turn you do that. So this will take up an entire turn without adding to the board most of the time. And when it's not, like, you're not really getting very much of a benefit off of it. That's just my opinion. Like I said, this card has potential. You'll play it in a good number of decks, especially if your card quality is really, really strong in your pool, or if you're playing like Sealed or something, a slower version of a limited format. This card gets a lot better, but compared to other options, I don't think it's that great. Not to mention, like, there are commons that already return cards from the graveyard to your hand. I don't really want that effect on my rare. I honestly don't. I want to open a bomb, and this is not a bomb by any means. It's a fine card at best, but I feel like it could have been an uncommon without, like, hurting any sort of playability. Curious to see what people think about that. So if you have an opinion, if you think this deserves to be a rare, let me know. But I honestly think uncommon is kind of the power level we're getting off of it. Kambal. All right, moving on. Kambal, Console of Allocation, is 1 white and a black for a 2/3 legendary creature, a human advisor, and a rare. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So apparently we're getting more legendary creatures, and I want to point out that someone commented on one of my videos, sorry, I forgot your name, but starts with an M, I think, that there is going to be another Planeswalker in the set. Apparently Mark Rosewater confirmed 4, and I forget his name, but if you're into the lore and stuff, like, you already know who it is. And there are a couple other legendary creatures, like this guy, plus I think there's going to be at least 1 more legendary creature because we have art for her. So just tons of legendary creatures in this set as is. Anyway, this card in general is actually just really good. As far as a limited perspective goes, it's 3 mana for a 2/3, which, you know, that's checking off a box right there as playable. And then it has just like this residual effect where if your opponent's casting spells, which will happen throughout the course of a game, like nobody just plays a 23 creature deck. They're going to cast a spell at some point. Like you just get value off of that. And then if they're like really heavily pushed into spells, then it gets much, much better. This seems like a card that could hit standard as well. I don't know that black-white like needs a creature like of this size or anything like that, but black-white doesn't have a lot of 3-drops that it plays right now. Not to mention like a really popular deck in standard is the blue-red style, whatever you want to call them, like the spells decks or the fevered visions decks or stuff like that. And those are pretty much vast majority non-creature spells. So Kambal might be a good sideboard option against those decks where your opponent, if they're just trying to burn your face, you're just going to be gaining like 80% of that life back. And when they go to burn him, they're using up one of their burn spells, you're gaining life, and they're losing life. Like just a lot in that matchup, I think. In EDH, I don't think this card will ever see play as a commander. And the reason I say that is because its ability, like, it's really easy to get around for a lot of decks, maybe not for things like Mizzix or Shuyun or something like that. But it's just, I don't see it replacing things like Karlov or Obzadot or even, I don't know what else. But it is good to see Orzhov getting some love in like Kaya from Conspiracy and cards like this. And this is a definite shoe-in for like Teysa decks and Karlov decks. It's just a very good card. I just don't know that it would make a particularly good commander for your commander deck. Lost Legacy. Lost Legacy. 1 and double black for a rare sorcery. Name a non-artifact, non-land card. Search target player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the name and exile them. That player shuffles his or her library, then draws a card for each card exiled from hand this way. So a couple things about this. This is very, very similar to, it's on the tip of my tongue, Infinite Obliteration from Origins, which, keep in mind, is rotating. And if this is the type of effect you want, like, this is a perfectly good way to just kind of replace those Infinite Obliterations in your sideboard. So it's particularly good against cards that rely on maybe just one creature or one planeswalker to win the game for them. Taking like Ulamog's or something like that out of a person's like scope of playable cards. The fact that it draws a card for each card named or each card that was exiled seems like a huge downside. Or it's not a downside. It's just really annoying that like if I'm trying to get my opponent's Emrakuls out of their decks, that they get to benefit off of it. Obviously, if they had Emrakuls in hand, they're just replacing it. They're at replacement level, but if you're like stripping 2 Emrakuls out of your opponent's deck, they get to draw 2 cards, and that's a huge downside. You also can't name an artifact, which may be relevant. These Gearhulk creatures are very likely to see standard play, or at least some of them will. The black one definitely, and this can't name those cards. And then final thing I want to say about this card is you can target yourself. You target a player with it. So if you have like a card that's just completely dead, in a matchup or something like that, and keep in mind it can be like an instant or sorcery or something like that, then you can strip those cards and replace them. So for instance, if you're playing against a deck where they just don't have a high creature count, and you're playing like green-black Delirium, and your main board is full of like Grasp of Darknesses and Ultimate Prices or whatever removal will be, murder, stuff like that, and it's just not doing you any work, like you can Lost Legacy that card out of your hand and then replace those. Plus draw additional cards for the ones in your deck. So if you know like your Grasp of Darkness is not going to be very good and you have 4 of them in your deck, you can actually target yourself with this and then draw a card for each Grasp of Darkness in your deck, which seems pretty nice. So there's potential here, and I think it will see play as a sideboard card the same way Infinite Obliteration did. But I don't know. It has a real downside if you're using it on an opponent's card. But obviously you're playing it for a reason. Aether Hub. I feel like I'm talking a lot about some of the cards today, which could be a good or bad thing. But anyway, Aether Hub, uncommon land here. When it enters the battlefield, you get an energy counter. Only taps for colorless, and then you may tap it and pay an energy to tap it for any color of mana. So pretty sweet little nifty utility land there. As far as limited is concerned, this is a great card. It helps fix mana, albeit only once, in the same kind of vein as a card like Crumble and Vestige, which actually I just noticed is in the Thesaurus, so glad to see that. But it fixes your mana once. If you have other ways to generate energy, you can use it as a constant way to fix mana, which is pretty sweet for an uncommon land too. This doesn't take up the rare slot. And then it's also just good in decks where you're using energy. So if you're in that green-red deck or something like that, playing this could be like the pivotal energy you need to like make one of your creatures bigger or something like that. So I think this card's pretty sweet, and I'm glad it's not a rare. A lot of times we just get like utility lands at rare that do something like this, and that's like really disappointing to open. But as an uncommon, like if you need this early or you want to build around it or you want to fix your mana, I think it's a pretty sweet little pickup. And I like the art on it. I like the art on everything in this set. It's pretty awesome. And then last card I believe for today is Dynavolt Tower. I think there's another card that says Dynavolt on it from like Ravnica. Like, is that an actual thing that I need to look up? Dynavolt, is that something that exists? I don't know. I'm a math teacher. I don't teach science. But anyway, Dynavolt Tower is 3 mana for a rare artifact. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get 2 energy counters. And then you may tap this and pay 5 energy counters to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. Now, that effect is great, but I don't honestly know how often you're going to be able to use it in a game of limited. So if you want to get 2 triggers off of it, you need to essentially cast 5 instants or sorceries, which a lot of games of Magic go by without a person casting 5 instants or sorceries. Obviously, that's not saying this card is like automatically bad or anything, because I think it's quite strong. And the same arguments for any of these energy counters can be made here. So if you have other means of generating energy besides casting the instants or sorceries, besides using the ability on this actual card, you can filter those into lightning bolts from this card, which is pretty sweet. Actually quite strong if you're able to do that repeatedly. And then you can also view this a different way, as add in something to the effect of each instant and sorcery you control deals a damage to target creature or player. And that's not like exact because you can't spread it up onto different creatures, but it is kind of like an idea, a way of looking at this, that every 3 spells you cast is going to bolt something. So every spell you cast is essentially adding a damage to a creature or player, which is pretty nice. And again, this can generate energy for your other stuff, but it goes in a more specific deck, either a deck that's able to generate energy through its creatures or through other artifacts really, really well, or it goes in obviously a deck that's able to cast instant or sorceries, repeatedly. So far, I haven't seen a card or like an archetype that leads me to believe there's like a heavy spell casting theme in the set, not like red-blue from Eldritch Moon, which is just like very obvious spell casting. But if there happens to be good common and uncommon instants or sorceries that you can get your hands on a bunch of them, this card gets a lot better. And keep in mind, cards like Die Young and Home and Lightning, or not Home and Lightning, but I think it's Harness Lightning, those can generate a certain amount of energy, and then you only have to use a fraction of those energies to kill certain things. So you can use the leftover energy to pay for cards like this and get maximum value off of it. So I think this card is strong. I would definitely try playing with it, but I could see myself being disappointed if it didn't work out. If all I'm getting out of it is 1 bolt, then it seems still pretty decent because it's essentially a prolonged 3-mana bolt. And I would pay 3 mana to kill, a medium-sized creature. But if that's all I'm ever going to get out of it, I could be disappointed opening this as my rare. I do think it has the potential to deal enough damage that it should be rare. I wouldn't want a lot of these floating around at uncommon because the abilities do stack. Well, the abilities don't really stack. They do generate double mana, or this 4 mana per instant or sorcery, but it's not like filtering that mana into one of these is really much better than spreading them out and filtering them into 2. So it just lets you activate the ability quicker. It doesn't really do that much. But anyway, enough about that card because I don't really know how to evaluate it, obviously. Let me know your opinions about that one, too. And also let me know what Dynavolt means. I've been just itching to learn a new word today. And yeah, that's it for today. Not a ton of spoilers. Quite a few actually, but that cycle's pretty easy to talk about. I think these cards are great. The only one I'm kind of shying away from as like a good card is this one here, Wild Dreams. I just honestly don't think it's that good, but I could be proven wrong, so I'm interested to see what people think. Anyway, looking forward to tomorrow, looking forward to the rest of the spoiler season, looking forward to next week in general, and then pre-release and blah, 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 so on and so forth. So let me know your opinions. Comment below or above if you're able to do that. Figure out a way to comment above. And yeah, my name's Timothy, and I will see you guys next time.